So this would be sort of an archetype that manifests as a philosopher and sort of changes the way philosophers think, and not just philosophers, but the society as a whole. They're in some ways reformers, and they take on these ideal manifestations. So then Soccio makes an interesting distinction between what this ideal is and then what an archetype is. And so the ideal, is sort of what we just described as a philosophical archetype, whereas an archetype in itself is just sort of this basic image being a manifestation of the essence of a certain type of person. And some of those we mentioned, but there's trickster, mother, hero, cynic, saint, pessimist, and so forth. There is also this distinction that he makes between an archetype and a stereotype, because I think perhaps this is commonly misunderstood, that people associate things that are simplistic distortions of a type of person, which is a stereotype, to be an archetype. But Soccio says these are different things here. The archetype is much more rich and manifesting qualitative distinctions. So what do archetypes do? Well, here's a verbatim quote from Soccio, the author of your textbook. Archetypes exemplify essential ways of coping with the universal aspects of life: suffering, death, loss, society, wealth, knowledge, love, purpose, in uncommonly pure ways, period. There are archetypes of evil as well as good, and of fools as well as of wise people. Unquote. So I think you get the idea, and I'm not sure how, because the idea of archetype is somewhat of a metaphysical claim, but it's also an empirical one too, and an observable one. I'm not sure how much he buys into these, or how much he is taking these terms on instrumentally and utilizing them in a methodological way to help with teaching. So let's continue. He goes on to some historical examples of these, which is the name of your textbook, title of your textbook, Archetypes of Wisdom. So here's some actual examples that can get these kind of theoretical definitions down to a substantive, concrete understanding. So the beginning philosophers that I sort of talked about in the beginning of this video, or the one before, were talked about as sort of sages or wise men and women. So an example of that would be the rational Greek sophos, which is a sage or a wise man, woman, or in between. Then there was the Native American wise woman, or the shaman. That's another example, if that's something that's helpful for you. An African witch doctor could also be an exemplification of this archetype of wisdom. Then there's others, for example, that manifest that Soccio discusses, like in maybe a little bit closer to us, like the New Testament, which he calls like a doubting Thomas, that being an exemplification or manifestation of the skeptic. That would be an archetype of the skeptic. And there's so many more, and he doesn't spend a lot of time here, but if you are more interested in this idea of archetypes, look into Carl Jung, look into the Jungians who have come on after him. Very interesting. This is why I'm not really sure how much he's invested in this or if he's using this as a tool. So, given that, there's this truth-seeking element, there's this wisdom-seeking element, we have to talk about the negative about philosophy, right? Philosophy is historically known to be, well, as it has been cultivated, Eurocentric, Western, classist, sexist, racist, and all the other, probably LGBT phobic, and all the other things that you can sort of imagine. But that is the case with most things that have any sort of historical lineage. Not to take away from its detrimental components, we always need to be cognizant and aware of these things as we're studying philosophy or reading historical texts, etc. Very important. This is true, and these prejudices and these male-dominated intellectual spheres have, without a doubt, tainted how we sort of view truth or how we view knowledge or wisdom. So given that this has taken place, there is some sort of, I guess, Pandora's box open for relativism within philosophy. But relativism, we will get to, doesn't necessarily mean no truth, but we'll get there.